But the biggest policy battle ahead, and I've talked about this on past shows, is the American Recovery and Reinvestment Plan. This is going to be the main way, one of the main tools to get the economy back on track, not just in the short term, but to start investing long term in rehabilitating and revitalizing our crumbling foundation. And we've seen a particular pushback surface this week, a selective leaking of a Congressional Budget Office report. You may have seen this. This was in the Washington Post. You've seen some conservatives pick it up. That 38% of the appropriated funds would be spent before October 2010, roughly the next 2 years. So the argument is the majority of the funding is not going to be spent in the next 2 years. Therefore, it's not really something that's going to help the economy in the short run. Now, there's a host of things wrong with this report. Number one, the biggest thing, I think, and we learned this from Congressman Oberstar on Thursday. My colleague Isaiah Poole blogged about it at the Campaign for America's Future blog, ourfuture.org. Congressman Oberstar, who heads up the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, said those numbers don't come from state government agencies. They don't come from highway and transportation professionals. They came from the Bush administration. And they're not the same numbers that Congress is getting from other entities, number one. Number two, even taking those numbers at face value, they excluded giant chunks of the proposed plan, particularly what tax cuts that are there. And there is sense to have some tax cuts as a short-term stimulus, putting money in people's pockets if they're going to people who are going to spend it, not to the wealthiest who are going to just stick it in their back pocket and not do anything different with it. Those numbers were not included in that numbers crunching. And it didn't include the state government aid that also has an immediate impact because these state budgets get crunched in recessions. They lose tax revenues. And if they don't get aid, they're forced to make budget cuts, police, fire, education, infrastructure, etc., that undermine your attempts to help the economy. So they didn't even mention that stuff. So we have to be careful not to let those arguments, those half-truths at best, dominate discussion. We need to be pushing back on that. And at the same time, as big as the package is and as important as it is to pass it quickly, if it gets bogged down, it's not going to have any short-term impact because we're already 1 year deep into recession. There's still room for improvement. And in particular, there's concerns that we got too much tax cuts in the package, and it has, as a result, limited the amount of mass transit funding that should be done. There's some in there, but there could be more. What was in the House version is arguably insufficient on the mass transit. There's lots of other good environmental things in the package, so you don't want to overstate the criticism. There is lots of stuff for clean energy and energy efficiency in the package. But hopefully on the Senate side, and there's talk from Senator Chuck Schumer that they are going to increase mass transit. So if you're going to contact your congressperson, I encourage you to do so, to put pressure to get this done quickly. And if you go to ourfuture.org, we have a tool that allows you to do that. Also, Americans United for Change is involved in pushing for the package. You might also add, pass it quickly and jack up the mass transit component in place of having as many tax cuts as you now currently have. That's a productive thing that we can do right now. And the way that President Obama is handling the position, he is restoring, in my opinion, checks and balances right away. He is treating Congress like a co-equal branch. He is not having them jam down his proposal as is, no if, ands, or buts. We're having a democratically deliberative process that allows you and I to be part of that process. You're allowed to speak up. If you put pressure, when democracy works as advertised, when you put pressure on folks and you speak up, it has an impact. we already had somewhat of an impact because there was a bit of an outcry that the tax cuts were too much, and they were scaled back somewhat from what Obama had proposed to what came out from the House Democratic Caucus. There are folks in the environmental community that said, when you're doing tax credits for renewable energy, they have to be quote-unquote refundable. That means if a business is struggling in the recession and hasn't made a profit, they still could benefit from the tax credit. Otherwise, what's the point? Otherwise, these renewable energy companies will just go out of business. And that's not good for the short-term economy or the long-term economy. It's a very similar principle to, we talked about this on the last show, I think, similar to tax cuts going to the poor. If tax cuts to the poor get spent, tax cuts to the wealthy sit and collect dust. House Ways and Means heard that call, and in what they passed this week included those refundable renewable energy tax credits. So we are having these impacts. Feel good about that. Keep doing more of it. And then you can make sure we have his package as big, as bold as it possibly can be.